Welcome to a very special Turnbuckle Trash Talk interview. I am here with a man who wears so many hats, he needs a very specially made hat rack just to hold them all. Mr. Zac Romero. Zac, thank you so much for joining me.
Ken, it's a pleasure to be on here. It's been a long time coming. We've crossed a lot of paths over the last couple of years, so I'm glad to be a part of the show.
Well, I have a feeling this is going to be part of a multi-segmented thing because we have so much we can talk about when it comes to just you, let alone all the things that you do. So what I want to spend this segment talking about is just Zac the guy.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
You grew up in Virginia, or you were born in Virginia. You find yourself in Florida, deeply embedded in the world of independent wrestling. How did that journey begin? Where did wrestling become a thing for you?
Okay, excellent question. So yeah, I grew up in Virginia, lived in Ohio for a while, and then came down here to Florida. I was still probably under 10 at that point. Wrestling had always been a part of my family. My parents were always big wrestling fans. So I had always gone to like local shows and things like that. But I have a question for you, Ken. What is your earliest wrestling memory? Like, what is your earliest memory of like you remember watching it on TV? Because I have mine. I've thought about it today, but I want to hear what yours is.
Oh, man. Well, I know I want to say WrestleMania 5.
Okay.
I want to say it's the earliest I can remember. Now, I know my grandpa used to watch wrestling, and I would always be watching it with him. So WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 2, like I was apparently watching it, but I was, a child. So I don't, but WrestleMania 5, I remember distinctly. But yeah, what about you?
Well, it's a tricky thing because with like the advent of like the network and things like that, we can go back and watch things. So like I've watched through WrestleManias that would have been going on when I was like an infant. But the earliest memory I remember super clear is I'm like 12 or 13 years old, and we had gotten a new cable provider or something like that. And so we were scrolling through like the movie preview channels, and I remember there being an advertisement for an ECW pay-per-view. And I remember Tajiri and Big Guido beating the balls off each other with steel chairs. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want this in my life. And so that, of course, right in the middle of the Attitude Era, so big resurgence, big interest. But to get me to here into actually being a part of pro wrestling has been the last probably, I would say, 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Started as a fan. Started going to independent wrestling shows, went to Shine, went to Chikara the first time it came down here. Made friends with some people behind the scenes, cameramen, people kind of running things. Just continued to be friendly and respectful. And then eventually, my wife and I come from a very artsy farts background, so we decided that a lot of wrestlers' merchandise was terrible and they deserved better. So we kind of started the ball rolling on that, jump cut another 4 years or so, and now podcasts and announcing and commentary and gimmick work and everything else under the sun.
So what was the first ever live wrestling show you went to? Do you remember?
Like I said, as a baby, I have photos with like Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake and stuff like that. So like a baby, late 80s, I'm sure there was ones there. And I remember going to a Nitro that Goldberg was there because I remember making a sign for him. But the first like indie show that I went to was the Chikara. No, I'm sorry. It was FCW in Brooksville because there was a poster on the streets of like a very dumpy Bo Dallas, not looking very confident. And the wife and I would drive past it 1,000 times and laugh. And then finally it stopped being funny. It was like, let's just go and see what happens. So it's us. It's every mutant in Brooksville. We go, we have a blast. And that started the whole ball rolling of like being really involved in independent wrestling.
So what was it that you found appealed to you most about wrestling? What was it? For me, it was always the characters. It was the stories. It was less the athleticism. I mean, that's special on its own right, but what was it for you that really called to you about wrestling?
100% character stuff. As you may know, and other people who have seen me or heard me on commentary, I'm not a very subtle man. I'm very obnoxious. I've always been kind of a theater guy. I tried playing football in high school my freshman year, and every coach would ask me after every play, are you in theater? Are you doing that? And I'd go, no. And they go, maybe you should consider it. So character stuff has been drawn to me. And so as soon as I started getting independent wrestling, perfect way to put it. I personally prefer my wrestling like I prefer my pinball machines. I want them very loud. I want them very bright. I want them very gimmicky. So that's always been sort of the focal point that I've had when it comes to wrestling.
Oh, absolutely, and it's the same for me. It's one of the things that has kept like me from becoming a really big fan of UFC or something like that. Is I feel like there is some pageantry, but the pageantry of like Randy Macho Man Savage coming out, or the Macho King, or just a variety of people, nothing compares to that in any sport other than wrestling.
Conor McGregor may come out and like have funny memes or like say funny things, but he's never gonna like open a bag and have a cobra come out and bite Macho Man on the arm. Like that's never gonna happen in UFC. So I feel like they're always gonna kind of be playing catch up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So who as a character really called to you? Like, who was one of your favorite characters growing up or even now?
Well, I was going to say, as obnoxious as it is, in the Attitude Era, I thought Road Dogg Jesse James was like the coolest guy. And so now looking back more analytically, you can see like, oh, well, he was just sort of the mouthpiece, and Billy was more of the physical, you know, sort of like workhorse of the tag team, and Road Dogg would just talk a lot of crap. But yeah, like that kind of stuff. And anybody, even to this day, I'll go back and watch old promos and just see like the run of promos that Macho Man cut, where he was just like an amateur magician for like 6 months, because it's like starts with cream of the crop, and then there's like cup of coffee, and then there's like he opens the robe and there's like the little trash can he stole from somebody's office. Like those kind of things have always interested me, and I look for that in wrestling now, and it's a little harder to come by because now there's like this elephant in the room of like, well, we should still look tough and we can't be as charismatic sometimes. So I'm always on the lookout for that.
So who do you think right now on either the WWE level or the independent scene, let's just rattle off some names, who do you think is really giving that character influence, who is really, you know, performing on that level as like a Randy Macho Man? I'm not saying that they're going to be the same, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, I'd say for especially the beginning, I thought like Bray Wyatt really encompassed that really well, of really building a character and almost like single-handedly bringing back vignettes that meant something. That would be like on the biggest stage. On the indies, I think David Starr does a really great job. He's been on our podcast a bunch of times, but he's got a natural charisma to him, but he also has an intimidating focus to him. Like when he'll cut a promo, he cuts it very, very purposely. And so when you watch, it really draws you in. And I really think that's kind of the biggest secret when it comes to cutting a promo as a wrestler, is it doesn't matter what you're talking about. It doesn't matter if it's like, oh, this is really serious business and I'm going to like kill this guy, or if it's something like, I'm this wacky character. As long as you bring 110% and a purpose to it, it will come across every time. But when you kind of go in half-assedly like, well, I was told I had to cut a promo, so here we are, that is always going to come across.
Now, I felt like with the overly scripted promos we're seeing on TV these days, I feel like a lot of the magic has been lost. You don't get that cream of the crop. You don't get the trash can under the robe. Is that...
There should be more magic tricks done in promos. That's really...
Oh, absolutely. So what advice would you give to the WWE or to any wrestling organization that is kind of stuck in that scripted rut?
So I think the key difference is it's not just scripted, because like Ophidian the Cobra cuts really good promos, but he goes through and scripts it out and kind of has a great idea of what he wants to say. I think the problem becomes when it's scripted by an unrelated third party. Because it's like, okay, Kent, you got to wrestle tonight. We need you to cut a promo. I'm going to tell you a couple days in advance. You know your character. Come up with something, and we'll meet in the middle. Instead of, well, here, I wrote this for you. Read it word for word. And you can't rely on other people to really understand your character. So I feel like just having that confidence and just going, okay, I'm really going to put thought into this. You can script it out. It's okay, especially if you've got like a memory to keep that. That's fine. But just, I think the problem comes when it's a completely unrelated third party. Like, we thought this would sound pretty good, so there you go. In school, I was always told that I was a better speaker than a writer. Like, I took a poetry class, and the whole class, it was horrible. The whole class would critique you the night before, then you had to read your poem, and then they all told you what the critiques were, and you couldn't respond. Oh, so it's just like it was like a classroom of anxiety. So I would write these poems or whatever about like Patrick Swayze's ghost or whatever BS I was coming up with at the time, and I would look at the other kids' papers, and it would just be covered in red. They would rip it to shreds, and then I would read the poem in the class, and I would see them all just erasing it, because once you heard it, it was different than when you read it on the page. Same thing with promos. If someone hands you, they might have thought it sounded good, but until it comes out of you, it's a crapshoot. So I think having your own promo, or having the willingness to cut a promo, or willingness to work with someone else and come up with an idea, that is going to be what sets you apart, as opposed to like, hey, they told me I had to come out and cut this promo, and here it is, go to my show.
Like, I get the idea of they want bullet points or want you to hit certain story marks or whatever it is, because, they're telling the longer-term story backstage, or
let's call it what it is. If you're not confident in your talent that they're going to provide what you want, you got to take more of a step in there, so that might be their thing. They're like, look, we don't trust that you're going to be able to knock this out. You just read this instead.
So, a good segue. You talked about being a better talker than a writer. Now you're on commentary. You're doing ring announcing. How did you get there? What brought you to that arena, so to speak, of being a commentator and being a ring announcer?
For me, and again, this isn't a blueprint on like how to get here, because I'm sure I've made countless mistakes along the way. But like I said, befriending people behind the scenes, being nice, and I've always been naturally obnoxious. So, like, on commentary, when I am losing my mind and flipping out, that is just me. That's me reacting honestly. And that's one of the big things I hear back from wrestlers and from other people is they're like, it's so refreshing to hear somebody be excited. And that's it. It's like I'm still just an excited goober. Now, unfortunately, I come from like kind of a family of like would-be comedians and like obnoxious guys. Like my father was obnoxious, his father before him. So there are times where like I'll try to be clever and I'll try to like come up with some kind of joke or something like that. And most of the time it's just a wet fart and it's awful. But I'm aware of it, and so I'll immediately call it out. And so it's just naturally just being super obnoxious and being very open to suggestion. Because like I'll have wrestlers be like, here's what I'm trying to do, or I'm trying to get this across. And I go, that's awesome. If you come to me with something, a character, an idea, a finisher, whatever, I promise you I will push it for you. But when you go, I don't know, man, my name's on my tights. I assume Vince McMahon is going to be calling me soon. I don't have a lot to work with there. So
was this something that you just kind of fell into, like, or was it something that you'd always wanted to do? Was it a goal, or was it just like, I happen to be in the right place at the right time and people like me, so they put me on commentary? Like, how did that happen?
Both. A little bit of both. It was, falling into it, but also, what is that phrase about, like, success is like being prepared when the unexpected happens? So it was like, I was able to, because I have a history of, like, filming videos and YouTube clips and stuff like that, so I already had an idea of like how to structure a setup. So when it came down of like, well, we could use a guy on commentary, it was like, well, I have a mic, I've got a way to edit it, like, you make yourself valuable. And then same thing with announcing. It was like, hey, I'm very obnoxious, I'm kind of a cartoon character. And eventually it was like, well, we don't have a announcing guy, would you consider trying it out? And it was like, of course. So that willingness to try and willingness to be prepared and make value, that's really what's kind of brought me here. Because now, especially with like the ACW Wednesday nights, my commentary partner and I, we've invested in our own soundboard. Like, we try our best to create value, because that's the trick, is if you can create enough value, be a wrestler, behind the scenes, merchandise, whatever, if you're creating enough value, then people can't tell you to leave. If you're creating that much value, then they're going to be like, whatever it takes to keep you around, we'll do it. So that's kind of the key in any performance with wrestling. In-ring, out-of-ring, whatever. Create that value, and then they can't get rid of you unless, you're a big dick or something.
So, speaking of creating value, you are one of, if not the mastermind behind Punk Pro Wrestling. So how did that all come about? That's like a huge leap from, I do merch, I do commentary, now I'm doing this whole show. What was the motivation behind it?
So the original motivation was like 2 WrestleManias ago, it was in Orlando. And we had made, through merchandise and that, we had made a lot of friends with a lot of wrestlers who were coming down. And it was kind of coming to a point where it was like, man, we got all this talent here, and they're only getting used for like a show this whole week. And so it was one of those cases where it was like, yeah, but realistically, like, how much money does it cost to run a show? And when they told us the number, that was the worst thing to happen, because the number wasn't astronomical. It wasn't like, well, you need $250,000. It was like, no, reasonably like a paycheck or two, you could probably cover it. It was like, oh, no. And so that sort of spawned. Now, I can't say that I'm like the head, like I invented it. It's sort of a secret cabal of people who have made Punk Pro a thing. But we're trying, man. We're trying really hard to just be different in Florida, and I don't know, just try to make good wrestling and be interesting.
Well, there's definitely a buzz about it. Whenever I hear Punk Pro come up quite a bit in conversation. I look forward to the promotion you guys do, because you put out great product as far as, promotion and stuff like that. So you talked about like it not being as big of a cost and stuff like that. I see a lot of promotions rise and fall pretty quickly. They're open for a couple shows, they close. What has been your strategy? What has been different that you've done that's allowed you to continue to succeed the way you have?
Well, again, not a blueprint. We did choke slam a 10-year-old, and the internet got real mad about that. So that was the start. No, it's been a matter of like calling in favors and, putting on the best show possible, and just really, you brought up an excellent point. In the state of Florida specifically, we have an ocean of talent, an ocean of potential, and a cesspool of companies where there's 1,000 wrestling companies just in the state of Florida alone. So that can cause a lot of problems. And not just in terms of like, oh, I got to promote and they're competing. No, I mean, like, if I have a wrestler and I'm like, hey, I think it would be great if you did this different, where is their incentive when it's like, yeah, or I could go to these 5 other companies and do the exact same thing and I don't have to change. So I actually talked to Saeed El Sabah about that like, why isn't there a Chikara in Florida where it's all these like bright characters and stuff like that? And we had discussed it. It's like, well, because there doesn't need to be. Because for, in Chikara's case, there's not a ton of companies in Philly. So it's like, hey, if you want to be a part of this, you got to step up and be larger than life. Whereas in Florida, it's like, yay, if you want to be a part of this, you got to step up and be larger than life. Or don't do that, and you can work plenty of other places, and that's fine too. But at Punk Pro, we really try to set ourselves apart. We're trying to grow. We're trying to advance. And as I said, we choke slammed a 10-year-old, and the whole internet got real pissed off about it. So.
Well, one of the great things about Punk Pro is I don't see the same people I see on a dozen other shows. You create stars, or you at least bring in people who might not be so commonly booked or so commonly available. And I think that is such a special quality about your show, and I think it does set your show apart, because when people come see it, they're not going to see people they can see every Friday, Saturday, Sunday anywhere in Florida, and I think that's a really good quality. So was Punk Pro inspired by other promotions, or was it just kind of naturally, organically grown? So
the Secret Cabal, one of the initial thought processes was exactly what you just said. It can be a Florida promotion, but it needs to show the absolute best of Florida and who are up-and-comers from out of state. And that's kind of where it's been the nucleus of the company ever since. So you're exactly right. So on the one hand, you see guys like Levi Everett, the Amish kid. You see Jonathan Wolf. You see Sean Kemp. You see Caleb Connolly, who was a Florida guy and isn't a Florida guy. We've had all kinds of different characters. Trip Cassidy, all these other guys from out of town come down here. But of course, the caveat is, when you have a company where you're like, hey, here's a bunch of guys you don't know, convincing people like, take a chance, please. I know there's 800,000 other companies around here, but please take a chance with our company. Can be a little daunting at times, but we hope that the product speaks for itself. That's what our goal is. Well, and I think it does. I've come up with this theory that no particular person in Florida draws. No specific talent draws a crowd. It's the quality of the show, because you can see a good portion of those people on a multitude of shows, but the one you want to go to is the one that has the best wrestling, the best story, the best production quality. And I think that's a quality I see in Punk Pro Wrestling. You guys do invest, and so you're going to put on a good show, even if it is a whole bunch of people nobody knows. So
What are your feelings about that? Like, is that what you kind of are trying to achieve? Do you kind of agree with that sentiment that it's really hard to be a specific draw in Florida?
I don't know if I'm gonna die on that hill of no one in Florida draws, but it is difficult if you think of it in like the territory days. It's like, well, yeah, Ric Flair drew great for NWA, and you could travel him around. It's like, yeah, but imagine if the entire NWA was just one state, and you have, 10,000 Ric Flairs, and it's like, it's going to be a little tougher to kind of draw on the people. But the idea is Punk Pro wants to put on the best product, want to be different in the state of Florida, and want to be not as serious business. I say that, but we've had like John Davis and Chip Day and guys who put on like just unbelievable matches that are serious business. But like, perfect example, if I'm doing ring announcing or commentary for another company, I will put on a dress shirt, I'll put on the slacks, I'll try to look good, I try to be, professional, whatnot. With a Punk Pro show, it's like t-shirt, jeans, suit jacket, because that's like the cool chubby guy look. And, if you've seen I do like a little opening sort of speech at the beginning of Punk Pro shows where it's like, this is performance art, this is interactive, this is, be as loud as you want, be as obnoxious as you want, but if someone gets in your way, get the fuck out of the way. So that's kind of the attitude that Punk Pro has, is like, we want to be fun and we want to make sure we're a good time, but we also want to put on the best product and have the best shows possible. And it's tough sometimes because there's definitely Luna, my wife and I, there's definitely parts where we're like, what if we just book all our friends though? Just to hell with everything, let's just book all our friends. And it's like, well, you kind of have to make those decisions as a business. That's why the cabal is there. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do, is put on a different show and bring in enough people that are going to be like, that was not what I'm used to seeing in wrestling, but I loved it.
So where would you like to see Punk Pro go? Where would you like to see it in, say, 5 years, 10 years? Do you even want to see it around in 10 years? I know some people prefer just to run for a few good years and then leave. What is your goal, your envisioned goals for Punk Pro?
Well, I was going to say, to the people who run a lot and then kind of burn out, the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long. So there's nothing wrong with that, of like, it's a very punk rock attitude to be like, oh, we're just going to go as hard as we can until we're dead. What do I envision for Punk Pro in the next 5 to 10 years? We buy out AEW. We buy out Lucha Underground. We become the Disney of pro wrestling, and we buy everything out, and everything just becomes like a mayonnaise paste, and it's all just the same thing. And we have our own app, and you have to download us to see what you actually want to see. But because we took it out of the theaters, we put wrestlers in the vault so you can't see them anymore, and then we bring them out in 5 years. That's the dream for Punk Pro. It's to just be world domination, and it becomes this horrible sellout, ugly machine that's unrecognizable. That's the goal.
Now, WrestleMania 36 is coming to Tampa. Do you have goals to have Punk Pro even slightly highlighted during that time?
So, to make this way less interesting, our goal for this next year is to find a new venue, because we want to be able to travel, because we haven't. It's basically just been in one spot and that's it. So we want to find new places to run to kind of branch out and bring it to other people. That being said, if we can accomplish that, do we want to have like a WrestleMania week show? Well, that's literally how the company started. The first 2 shows were WrestleMania week shows with like friends and great talent in town. So it only makes sense to do that again. So our goal is to do that. How feasible is that? I don't know. But to go with your previous question, what do I see in 5 years? I see WrestleMania 40 sponsored by Punk Pro Wrestling and Fully Gimmicked. That is what's going to happen. So it has been said, so it will be done. And that's that.
So you talked about Fully Gimmicked. That's a nice segue there itself. You talked about seeing guys needing better gear, and that's kind of what the inspiration was behind it. Talk about the whole process of getting that started, because now it's, I believe, a household name on the indies. I see a lot of people talking about Fully Gimmicked. A lot of people host their merch on Fully Gimmicked. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, our first real opportunity for merch was with the late Wayne Van Dyke. He was one of the first who ever came to us and was like, hey, because we had talked about doing shirts or merchandise or something, and he believed in us, and he worked with us to kind of get the first Wayne Van Dyke and those kind of shirts made. So that was a real big turning point for us. But like I said, Luna and I, both artsy farts backgrounds. I had done some like tech schooling in high school, so I knew a little bit about like ink pressing and stuff like that. And so, again, just like starting a wrestling company, it was like, well, how much money would it realistically cost to like put merch together? Oh, that much? That's not terribly much. Whoops, now this is my new second job. So, yeah, the whole premise has been there are wrestlers who are incredibly talented who are not being paid what they should be. Everyone should make like living wage off wrestling, and they don't. So merchandise is their best key, so why have half-assed merchandise? One of the biggest things that drove me nuts was going to a wrestling show, falling in love with a wrestler, going over and be like, I would love to buy something from you. And they're like, oh, you can go online and my shirt's there. Guess what, dude? By the time I get in my car, drive home, I have already talked myself out of it. I've already gone, I need to spend that money elsewhere, and you lost a sale. So we've always had this drive to make new merch. And then that we got involved with super great people. And then once we got involved with Sue Young, right before she like exploded, that became this weird challenge of like, well, she's got diehard fans and they want just the craziest stuff we can come up with. So then that pushes us to make crazier and crazier things. So now we've made like giant Pikachu statues, and we've made like, there's been paintings made, and there's banners and flags and everything else. There's like bouquets and pop vinyl and action figures. Like, it just keeps driving us to get more and more inventive, because there's a lot of places you can get t-shirts made, but we want to stand out and help wherever we can, and we try to make it as affordable as possible for talent so that they're making their money. Because let's face it, there's companies out there that'll do it online, but when they're charging you $15 to make a shirt, and it's like, well, I can't charge $30 for a t-shirt, so how am I going to do this? We don't want to be that. So we try our best. And there's been ups and downs, and like I said, we basically oopsie-daisied into another 80-hour-a-week job that we just run out of the house. So, I don't know, Fully Gimmicked's been weird. We love it, and it's become a kind of brand thing, and we've got ambassadors and just awesome people who have worked with it. And little by little, we're starting to get, because we actually got some advice from Lince Dorado before he blew up that was, don't worry about your brand being on the t-shirt of fans. Worry about getting good with the boys. Get in with the boys. That's what's most important. And so we've stuck with that ever since. So we've never really worried about, like, you know, there's other brands out there where they're like, yeah, we got some wrestlers, but look at our shirt. And it's like their stupid logo or whatever, and they're just pushing that. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Would I love to see a crowd full of people with just like shirts that just say Fully Gimmicked? Of course, it would make my heart grow 3 sizes. But at the end of the day, is that important? Not as much as it is important to have wrestlers who've got good merch.
So you mentioned some of the services that Fully Gimmicked offers. Can you give me like a quick rundown? Because we got a lot of workers who watch this show. They're having a hard time figuring out where to get merch, how to get merch, what kind of merch to get. So give me just a brief, if you can, rundown of what kind of services Fully Gimmicked offers and why you would recommend workers come to you guys.
Okay, so we start off with graphic design. So if you don't have an idea for merch, we can help with that. 8x10s, posters, stuff like that. We've done t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops. We've done shorts before. We technically, I think, did a knee pad once, but that was tricky. And so that's a key right there. To rotate out your merchandise with the seasons. So if like it's the winter months, especially if you're up north, start investing in hoodies because they're a little more expensive, but people are going to be like, oh, perfect, I'm freezing in here. In the summer, tank tops, t-shirts, stuff like that. We've dabbled in fanny packs, koozies, bandanas, decals, stickers, and then like weirder stuff. But basically the idea is, there was actually talk of, if you don't have merchandise, you're like, I don't even have like a character thing yet, invest in a new Polaroid camera. They're like $100 on Amazon, and charge $5 for a photo with a person, and you'll sign the back. So then you just like take a selfie with the Polaroid, comes out, okay, great, sign the back, boom, you've made $5. You didn't actually have to bring t-shirts or anything, or mugs or anything like that. So whatever you can do, especially if you're a good wrestler or you're an exciting character, people want to support you financially. So give them that opportunity. Make it easy for them. Because the easier you make it for them, the more likely it is they're going to, if they're like, well, you got to do this and do that. Oh, and also another thing, when you have your merch table, cash is nice, but having a way to read credit cards or debit cards, choice. Because a lot of people don't carry cash.
I don't carry cash, so I totally agree with you there.
Anybody who's got the ability to, I'm like, oh, you're already one step ahead. So that's another little fun fact to keep in mind as well, because you want to make it as convenient as possible for people to support you.
So where can they find Fully Gimmicked? What's the best way to get a hold of you guys to start that process?
Well, we're all over social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel, which may be posting a new project that you and I have been talking about in private. Nude films. No. Social media. Fully Gimmicked on social media. And like I said, we're here to help. So if you've got an idea, if you don't have an idea, we'll make it work, even if we can't do it in-house. I've had some people that are like, I need this portrait of the Mona Lisa done. And it's like, well, I can't do that in my house with just a little bit of vinyl. But we know people who can. So we'll network you if nothing else.
Now, I want to talk about the IndyKast, but I know we're running short on time. I am not purposefully ignoring that because I think what you guys do is absolutely phenomenal. I like tuning in. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other people that like tuning in. So we will get to that, but where can people find you? I mean, this is part one of probably many, but let's start with this just being part one. Where can people get a hold of you? What do you want to plug as we wrap up here?
Fully Gimmicked, obviously, first and foremost. IndyKast is the podcast that I'm a part of, IndyKast, all over social media. You can usually find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm not very interesting on my own, so it's just Zac Romero on all that garbage on Instagram and things like that. But yeah, just Fully Gimmicked and IndyKast. Those are the two main ones. Oh, and I have a horror podcast I do too called Frightful Failures because I hate free time. I don't know why. I just hate free time and I just need to be constantly working. So Frightful Failures is my horror podcast. IndyKast is the wrestling podcast. Horrible Horrors on YouTube if you want to watch me talk about horror movies, I guess. Oh, I'm on Roku. I'm on B-Movie TV app on Roku.
Many hats.
Yeah, they show if you ever want really bad B movies for free, and you have a Roku, download B-Movie TV. I'm on that. And and we do Fully Gimmicked Fight Club on B-Movie TV, so you can see every Saturday night. You get to see like random wrestling matches that I do commentary over that I particularly liked. So
well, and also Punk Pro has a show coming up.
This guy is a professional. May the 18th, Punk Pro Wrestling, Downfall of Us All. It is our 11th show. And Caleb Conley versus Troy Hollywood, Zach Cooper versus Gabe Zilla. Chip Day and Aaron Epic team for the first time in 2 years. There's a GYSI, a Get Your Stuff In Scramble that has Dick Danger in it. It's going to be nuts. And it's going to be the Gulfview Event Center, May the 18th, Port Richey, Florida. Tickets are on Eventbrite and on Facebook. You can find the event. And, I just love everything that you guys are doing, too. You guys are hustling. I appreciate it. And I guess this is where we end part one of a multi-part series.
Well, yes, absolutely. And we are actually going to be present for Downfall of Us All. So we are really excited to join you guys for that. Thank you, Zach, so much for joining me. Part one comes to an end now, but we will have part two, I'm sure, very shortly after that. Thanks, Zach.
No problem.